Welcome to another episode of the Dre and Smiley, the Inner Circle podcast.
Smiley, man, I'm so excited to have our next guest on today. So, oftentimes we hear about people that, they hit it big financially in terms of, independence, not having to, go and answer to the man every day type thing. Our next guest takes that to another level. She's not only achieved financial independence, but she also teaches and shares her story with others. I'll read a quick bio, then we'll jump right into it. Jackie Cummings Koski has overcome poverty, divorce, and single motherhood to achieve financial independence. Some refer to it as the FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early. In her 40s, on a modest income, she achieved a net worth exceeding $1 million. She's been on a number of shows like CNBC, Rachel Ray, Market Watch, etc. Jackie is an author of an existing book titled Money Letters to My Daughters. And we'll talk about another book coming out here as well. Jackie, welcome to the podcast. Let's jump right into it.
Hey guys, I'm so glad to be hanging out with you. I'm anxious and excited for this conversation.
Awesome. We are too. We are too. So often I read about people who have achieved financial independence. Their journey is something like, I invested in real estate. I started with 2 properties, ended up with 20, and now I have 150 units, and those have allowed me to retire early. Others are born with a silver spoon, and so they never really had to work hard a day in their lives, that type of thing. Talk to me about your journey to financial independence.
My journey is more of one that I hope can be repeated by the average person. Growing up, I grew up in the South in poverty and, never imagined, reaching financial independence. I didn't even know what a net worth statement was. But the one thing I knew was that I didn't want to be in poverty anymore. So if anything, that was sort of my motivation. Um,
Sure.
but I was taught to just, find a good job. Back then, they had pensions, find a job with good benefits. And that's the model I was trying to accomplish. And as I'm going through this, I hit a few roadblocks in my lifetime. And one of those roadblocks really woke me up and made me think about, okay, how do I make sure that I'm going to be okay? My daughter's going to be okay, and I'm never going to be in poverty again. And thinking about that, I just started having this really insatiable curiosity around personal finance and money and how to make sure, how to figure out how to grow it. I just dug, and dug. I was so curious about how this could work out. And of course, with information being more available where I can actually get the answers that I needed, I just started looking at simple things like, okay, how do I make sure, I don't get into a lot of debt or I pay off the debt that I have? How do I save enough money where I can retire like everybody else? I wasn't looking to retire early. And I started learning about investing, and that was really the light for me. I just love learning about the stock market. I love learning about, investing, and it wasn't anything fancy. I just knew that compound growth was very powerful. So however you do it, you mentioned real estate. So you could do it through real estate. You can do it through the stock market. You could do it through entrepreneurship. For the stock market is probably the one that's most available to most people. And I say that because typically when we get a job, we have a 401k or a 403b. Those are investments. So when I started learning about investing in compound growth, I'm like, okay, so why am I not maxing out my 401k? Why am I not maxing out my Roth IRA and my HSA? I learned to invest in that. So all this stuff was adding up to where I'm like, I really like learning about money. Financial literacy became my thing. I wanted to teach young people. I wanted to teach anyone else that may have come from an underserved community like me, other people that may have not gotten financial education like I didn't have until later on down the road. So finally, when I started being a little bit organized about my money and my numbers, I'm like, okay, I'm doing the math, using the 4% rule and making a few modifications from there, looking at my situation and what I wanted to do afterwards, knowing my why. I wanted to teach other people. And I had gotten to the point where I could walk away and be okay. I even had a bigger cushion than I thought I needed because I didn't want to be in poverty again. So if everything went wrong, um, I had my cushion. And if and I didn't even assume any other income. It was living off of my investments. And so that was kind of my path. And I just don't think it's that unique. And it's certainly repeatable for a lot of people because, most people, they start their career by working a regular job. That's a good starting point right
Hmm.
there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going
Yeah.
to pass it to Smiley here in a second, but one thing that comes to mind as you share your story is that it seems that people I've talked to, things I've read, individuals, their level of financial literacy is learned indirectly through their upbringing, right? My father-in-law grew up, really, really broke, um, sharecropper, etc. As an adult, he could squeeze $1 and 5 quarters would fall
Right,
out.
right, right.
He's one of those guys that was extremely thrifty. And, as a young man, I was fortunate enough to know him for, a good bulk of my adult life. I learned a lot of tips and tricks from him. But that experience, that financial literacy for him was developed as a kid, right? And then what you said that also in terms of teaching the importance of compounding. I saw a post that you shared where you gave $50 to your niece, I
Yeah.
believe,
Yeah.
and said, hey, listen, $50 a day, I think it is,
A week.
can lead a week, $50
A
a week,
week.
can lead to you becoming a millionaire. And her response was something along the lines of, a really excited, thanks,
Yeah.
Auntie, you're the best, or something like that with a
Right,
heart.
right.
The fact that you're teaching that at a young age is so very important. But talk about the path to now that you've learned the importance of financial literacy. Now you're teaching it, you're sharing it with others. You're a financial planner. You're a credentialed financial planner.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that path and what you're doing in that respect, and I'll pass it over to Smiley.
Yeah. So once I retired, it just cleared my brain so much to where I became more creative. I went after more of the things I wanted to do, more of the people I wanted to work with. Like I love talking to you guys today. I'm up on a Saturday morning because I want to talk to you guys, not because I have
All
to.
right.
And so so that makes a huge difference for me. So I have a lot more, excitement, enthusiasm. Teaching other people about money just lights me up when I'm able to take a complex topic and boil it down to where people finally say, oh, I got it. That makes sense. Why doesn't everybody explain it that way? So I went down the credentialing route. That was not what I was even going for. But as you can't even always direct or look at every direction you're going and not see what things might sort of divert you or put you or take you in another direction. So that was me for like getting my CFP, also something called the AFC. These are high quality, gold standard fiduciary credentials that I'm proud to have. But I knew I didn't want to practice in the normal way. Especially going through the CFP, it basically, and I love complex topics, I love solving problems, but a lot of it is geared toward the top 5% wealthy people, all these unique instruments and things like that. And it was a great experience to learn all of that. But I'm like, you know what? Why shouldn't everyone have access to the mind and the knowledge and experience that a CFP has? And so I want to do that. So I want to do one to many. So by being on your podcast, I'm hoping to touch a lot more people. If I was a one-on-one financial planner, I'm lucky if I could, handle one, maybe 200 clients. And so I just want to spread that a lot more. And a lot of these concepts, they are so simple at their core that even high school students can understand it. And what I always do is I start where they are at. Like, I have a teacher that I work with locally. Her name is Miss White, and she has a classroom, a new cohort of students each year. I used to come in a couple times a year, and we text back and forth. She's really funny, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I really need to have you come in because they're all invested on Cash App." So, so I'm like,
Oh,
okay, sure, I'll come in. Yeah, and the thing is, I can't go in there and start talking about budgeting when their mind is all on Cash App and investing. So
mm,
that's where I'm going to start. Now I know how to make the connection between budgeting and cash flow and all the other personal finance topics, compound growth, that relate back to their interest in investing on Cash App. So I'll ask them things like, well, where do you get the money to invest on Cash App? Oh, you have a job. Well, how do you decide how much you spend on Cash App versus like buying your Nikes or buying a new iPhone or going out to eat or ordering DoorDash? So I just start where they're at, and I just develop it around that, and that's enough to keep their attention. Plus, I give away a lot of $2 bills over here to keep them interested too. So.
hey,
One
Smiley,
thing.
real quick. I'm sorry. To the
Mhm.
$2 bill story. Tell me about that. I read that online in
Yeah.
terms of you saving $2 bills until it accumulated to about $3,600. Can you share
Yeah,
that story real quick? Then I'll let Smiley jump in.
yeah, so it was kind of crazy because, as I mentioned, I grew up in poverty. I was raised by a single dad with 6 kids, so we didn't have much at all. But when I got my first job, it was at Shoney's, and I would go back then. You were given a paper check, and then you had to go to bank and cash it. So one day, I had gotten back a $2 bill, and so I looked at it and I thought it was something special. And so every time I cashed my check after that, I would ask for $2 bills, and I kept collecting them because I thought they were special. And then while I was in college, I was a poor college kid, but I was still getting $2 bills from the bank. And it's adding up. Okay. And then once I graduate, I go through my career. I mean, like 20 plus years, I'm still getting $2 bills. Instead of just $2 at a time, I would say, give me all the $2 bills you got. And when my daughter, I think she was like in her early teens, but she's like, how many $2 bills do you have? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's count them. And when I counted them, it was $3,600, which would have been, 1,800 bills, 1,800 $2 bills is
Yeah,
$3,600.
yeah.
So I thought, okay, what am I going to do with all these $2 bills? And I couldn't just turn them in at the bank. I couldn't just spend them, like they were any other currency. So I decided, with all the financial literacy stuff that I was doing, that I would give them away, especially in high school. So if the kids are asking a good question, they're going to get a $2 bill. If they answer one of my questions, or if I ask any type of questions that come up, I find an excuse to give them a $2 bill to keep them engaged. And all of them, their eyes lit up. Most of them never seen a $2 bill, or they got it a great story from their grandpa or someone. They were taught that it was lucky. So it just always made things a lot more engaging. So now they can go home, and when mom asks, what did you learn in school today? They can at least say, I got a $2 bill. And of course, the mom is going to say, well, how'd you get a $2 bill? And then you got a good discussion about money.
Yeah, I love that. I want to circle back. You mentioned compounding, the rule of 4% rule. You mentioned compounding. For our audience, can you explain compounding and how that turned the light bulb on for you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest question I had, and a lot of people have, how do I know how much I need to retire? Like pensions are mostly gone. So you don't get that nice fixed monthly payment for the rest of your life. And I didn't either where I was working. So when I learned about the 4% rule, basically what that is whatever your nest egg is, if you take off 4%, it should be able to last you for the rest of your life. And that 4% needs to equal what your expenses will be in retirement. And as far as the FIRE movement, FIRE is financial independence, retire early. Another easy way to look at it was 25 times your expected expenses. So we all like easy math. I don't want to put in like 20 different variables, or have to go to a professional to be able to do this. I can do math. Okay, I spend about $40,000 a year, and that's after taxes and everything, about $40,000 a year. And so that times 25 is what? $1 million. So I'm like, that's easy enough. And then on the back end, okay, if I take off 4% of that $1 million every year to live on, That's $40,000. That should last the rest of my life. Now, retiring much younger, there's a longer time span, because when they did this study, it was based on a 30 or 40-year retirement. But retiring so early, the biggest benefit you have is human capital. So I'm not just going to sit around. Like, for instance, we all work hard, we hustle. So you can take the girl out of the hustle, but you can't take the hustle out of the girl. So she's going to be doing something, and some of that stuff that she's doing is probably going to earn her a little money. And who knows where it's going to go. So every dollar that I earned from doing whatever project I wanted to do with whoever I was working with, every dollar that I get that way, I don't have to pull off my investment. So I'm not even pulling off 4% a year. Like, maybe the first year I retired, I probably took money from my investments. The second year, just a little bit. The third year, my income covered all of my expenses. Now, that's not consistent income from a day job, but I love projects because I love to see results. I love to see how they turn out, modified at how I looked at it. And then on top of that, when I was doing my numbers for retiring early, I didn't include Social Security at all. I was like the biggest pessimist. Now, I since did a little more research, and it will be around. So that's the backstop. That'll cover
Hmm.
probably over half of what I need in my later years. So, that makes me feel like I got even, yet another cushion that I didn't even account for. So,
That is so amazing because I recall, and please, audience and listeners, don't get me wrong or get upset, because I remember reading Warren Buffett. He had his tonsils out. And he read a newspaper when he was only 8 years old, and it talked about the rule of 72 and how money compounds over time. And then John D. Rockefeller, he was 12. It's a different article, but he learned about compounding money then, and that's how they got that investor's mindset. But when Warren
right.
was stuck in the hospital, he's like, what? I take a dollar and it compounds at 72% or 1% or 10%. And he did the math. He's like, man, and that's how they became super, super investors. So when you speak, say from your experience, and I think what you're doing, I'm in software. When you said one to many, that's a software term. I love that because you're doing one thing and it's a multiple. The one to
Right.
many is a formula. From your experience while you're doing this, meeting people where they are, what has been the top two challenges for people of our, say, persuasion, just to get them to understand? Because a lot of times when they hear, I talk to some people and I'm like, dude, you got to invest, you got to do this. They hear the horror stories where the bank shut down, or they see Wall Street, people lose their money, and it's just like they don't see the positive. They always see that one negative. But what were the two top challenges that you would confront when you're coming across people, just trying to get them to understand your strategies?
Well, I think the mental and emotional side of money is very real. Like, there's no other information that's getting through if in their mind they don't feel like they can do it. And there's plenty of reasons. There's historic and systemic issues that we've had to deal with throughout history that still trickle in and are sprinkled throughout our lives today. But not only that, maybe, like you said, maybe they had a really bad experience or something. And part of my program when I went to get my master's degree was financial therapy. And it wasn't therapy is, and I'm not from the psychology side, but my professors were. And the biggest thing they taught me was that you're not there to change someone. You're there to provide the space and the grace to allow them to finally maybe try to think through or work through whatever issues they might feel they have. Because so many of us have never had the opportunity to openly talk about money, where people aren't cutting us off or judging us. So more than anything, I'm just a good listener. So I like to listen to what they're saying is the issue. And usually if the topic comes up, they are interested on some level. So I always acknowledge how they feel and that they're thoughts and feelings are valid, because that's really important. So once they do that, it usually takes them off guard. And maybe now you've got a little more air will flow through, right? So then we will start, like, because I'm a Black woman myself, I have a lot of Black women reaching out to me. And I remember this one individual, she had been married for like 15 or 20 years, maybe a little bit longer, but her husband was a physician, and a big part of the time that he was in med school, she worked and she supported. And the deal was, once he became a physician, he would be the one to, bring in the money, and she would stay home with the kids. So she did. So she was a stay-home mom, and they ended up getting divorced. And nothing was saved for retirement. So she is like in her 50s, really so worried, so concerned. And once I acknowledged that, I started giving her a few more technical things to confirm that she's going to be okay. Like, they were married for more than 10 years. So at minimum, she'll qualify for his Social Security. Okay. So that's a little bit of a retirement thing. And then we talk about what she does. She absolutely loves what she does. So she's not even wanting to retire early or anything. She just wants to retire on time. And she worked in public service. So there's all these things that I was just building around what her anxiety and her concern was about. Now, are there other things like budgeting and emergency fund? Yes, there is. But this was what she needed in the moment. And all the other stuff, it will start to just spread out, like almost like a spider web. But the core is what her immediate concern is, her immediate thing that's making her feel defeated. So that's kind of how I approach it.
No, that's good. And after this one, I'll turn it to Dre. But we had a guest on, and I've never heard of this term. And he said, what my father experienced was financial PTSD, because there was some sort of trauma that his father went through, and therefore the kids that he raised had to endure that same sort of financial trauma. And I've never really heard of that, had heard of problems from finances expressed that way. So
Yeah, there's a
thank you
whole
for
new
sharing
field.
that.
Yeah, a whole new field now, financial psychology, financial therapy. There's a financial therapy association. It's a big deal. And the reason why I moved towards that is because I always kind of felt like there was a strong connection between uh, money, personal finance, and how people felt and how people thought and their psychology. And it's a powerful thing when you can work through that. And it's really the mindset that has to come first. Like, one of my big wake up calls was after I got divorced. And it took almost 2 years to get my mind right. Could I have just immediately launched into saying, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do that? Well, I just wasn't ready for it. But then after the 2 years, my mind really, I was so ready. So I was off to the races. So it just makes a huge difference to make sure you acknowledge the mind. And a lot of us come from, like, I had a great aunt, and I have longevity in my family, so I definitely have to prepare correctly. But I had an aunt, she lived until she was 111. And then her
Ooh.
sister lived until she was 101.
Wow.
So a lot of people would say I would never want to live that long. And, God has a plan for all of us. So it was just a higher being. And she was supposed to be on this earth that long. We all have our time, right? It wasn't her time.
Mhm.
And just
Right.
you can imagine some of the conversations we were able to have. So she lived through, you know, right after post-slavery, segregation,
Mhm.
desegregation. She was a teacher, but
Mhm.
they couldn't teach at the regular schools. They had to teach the Black schools. And
Mhm.
in order to get whatever her certificate was, they had to go to their own schools. And that's how HBCUs were even created. So when someone's mentioning HBCUs, I just make sure they understand that there was a time in history where HBCUs were absolutely required. Otherwise, none of us Black people would have gotten an education. Now they're
Yeah.
historically Black colleges, but back then we needed them. Now it's the history that we're honoring. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. As you talk about financial therapy, it seems like that's like first step for most, right? I think back as Smiley was sharing the story about our prior guest's father and how his upbringing impacted his financial literacy. I think back about myself. I remember in college, there were times where, I think a lot of college students have, especially from my generation, experienced where you get credit cards that we shouldn't have. We we spend the money that we don't have. No, we can't pay it
Right.
off. I remember vividly, Jackie, being at work. I was in college, but being at work, and they'll call. You're sitting in your cubicle, and you're like, um, I'll make a payment next Tuesday. Or can you call me back tomorrow?
Right, right, right.
Like it's the anxiety of like not being able to have the conversation, and then they tell you things like, "Well, can you borrow?" No, they're calling you to pay off a debt, and they say things like, "Well, can you borrow the money from somebody to pay it off?" Well, wait a second. I still owe them. They don't care how you get the money. This is what they're. So
Right.
all that definitely has played into you know, my financial literacy today and how I look at money and that sort of thing. So the
Yeah.
therapy aspect or therapy component, I'm so glad that was part of your curriculum when you were in school because it's so
Yeah.
invaluable, like you just shared.
Yeah, we
Um,
we did a lot of cool exercises and stuff while we're in class too. And the professor, my main professor, she was from the psychology domain. She was a family and couples therapist by trade.
okay,
And so it was
okay.
so different to learn under her versus like these hard hitting, very technical financial topics. So I remember our first class, she was like, "Well, welcome to class. I want you to feel comfortable. I don't want you to be stressed." So it was just nice to
You're like,
get that
you're,
psychological
you're
side.
like,
I
you're
was
like,
like, "Oh my
okay, is
gosh."
she for real right now? What's going on here?
So to this
Okay,
day, we are good friends because I learned so
yeah,
much from her, and
sure.
she's amazing. But it was a great program, and it definitely uh helped me with understanding how important that psychological piece is.
Sure. So let's shift gears just a bit. Talk about the book, your first book. I believe the title of it is Money Letters to My Daughters. Tell me about how
Yes.
that came about. And I believe it's letters to your, at the time, 17-year-old daughter. How did that book come about?
Yeah, so it is called Money Letters to My Daughter, and that was a labor of love. Like it will forever be my greatest work. So at the time I wrote the book, I had been divorced for several years, but getting my financial life together, and I was learning so much. And when we start to learn stuff, the first thing we want to do is teach our kids, right? Or somebody in the younger
Mm,
generation. So for me, part of my program in college was in undergrad was journalism. So I enjoyed writing. That was an outlet for me. And so I decided, so I started writing the book when she was 14. So she wasn't listening to anything that I had to say. So I'm like, how do I get this information
what?
to her?
A 14-year-old now listening to you?
I
That's
know.
hard to believe. What are you talking about?
So at
Both
that
me and
time,
Smiley can relate to that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
at that time, look, podcasts weren't around, YouTube wasn't big. We didn't have all the outlets we have today. So,
Mhm.
but I did look at how much easier it was to get a book published now. And I'm like, I don't know if I have enough to write a book, but I just started thinking about how do I write this book where she'll actually read it? So I started writing them
Mm.
in just short little letters. My daughter's name is Amber. So I would say, "Dear Amber, you know, um, stay away from the high fee credit cards. They're nothing but crumb snatchers, and I'll sign it, Mom against crumb snatchers or something like that. But I would do I would do little things like
I
that to try
love
to
it.
make it funny. Yeah. And as I was writing the letters, she was the only one that really even knew that I was writing a book, but I would have her read each letter to ask her if they made sense. And sometimes I had to rewrite them or clarify
Wow. You're
things.
crafty,
So,
you are.
yeah. So even though she may not have like read the book cover to cover once I published it, she had read all of it multiple times. And sometimes they would start a great conversation. So my goal, I started when she was 14. I was working at the time, full time plus. And so I gave myself until I wanted to finish it in time enough to give it to her as her high school graduation gift. So she was 17. I finished it a little bit ahead of time, got it published, and that was my gift to her. And
Wow.
yeah, and when and it and all I was expecting, I wanted her to buy a copy of the book. It's cool that it's available for everyone else on Amazon, if anybody else cared to read it. But my goal was to memorialize the stuff that I had learned and pass it on to my daughter. And turns out there's a lot of people that were interested in the information in that book. So I had a lot of high schools inviting me in. I had my big, tall, 6'4" brother getting me into all the high school and the school district we graduated from. So we immediately went to the high schools in our community. And this was in South Carolina. And so Big Brother looked out. I didn't have no discipline problems and nothing like that with the kids because he was there. So it was so fun. And I think the hardest part of the book was when I was sort of writing a foreword and thinking about my own upbringing, thinking about my dad. Like I mentioned, he was a single dad with 6 kids. He passed away about 3 months before I graduated from high school. So I'd never really thought through a lot of that stuff. So that was the most unexpected part. It's supposed to be to my daughter and all that, but then I'm going back and I'm thinking about my childhood and how I grew up. But yeah, so that's how the book came about. And like I said, it will forever be my greatest work. And, it opened my eyes around a lot of things. It helped me organize my thoughts. And I think my daughter's in her 20s now. She's definitely taken a lot away from the book and, crafting her own life and approaching things in her way. Yeah.
Great. Based on what you shared about that book, I'm excited to read your second book. Tell me about this next book that drops on April 30th of this year. Let me know if I got the date correct.
Yeah, you got the date correct. So far, it's on schedule, but it is called F.I.R.E for Dummies, and F.I.R.E is Financial Independence, Retire Early. Now, that is a new name that most people have seen if they're reading any financial media, Forbes, MarketWatch, CNBC, any of those, they are writing about F.I.R.E. And it is a new name. It's a new acronym. And a lot of people are attracted to it, as I was, because it really does simplify things. Now, even though the name is kind of new, the concept really isn't. If you boil it down, it's live on less than you earn, invest the difference, and F.I.R.E, the retire early part and reaching financial independence, it just speeds it up. And it does things a lot more efficiently, optimizing certain parts that maybe 20 years ago, we didn't even have the ability to do so. So that's what that's about. And, I'm in a lot of these communities, and these are really, really smart people. And some of the stuff is just kind of over people's head, and they need to start with the basics. And so I was very attracted to writing this book and partnering with Wiley because they have a very large reach with everyday people that want to start with the basics. And I'm like, I'm an educator at heart. I like to break it down. I'll have my friends that are around me all the time where I'll say, so a mutual fund is just a basket of stock. So every time I'm talking to them, if I'm mentioning mutual fund, I always say, yeah, mutual fund is a basket. They're like, I know, Jackie, you tell me every time we talk. I'm like, I talk to kids imagine teachers that have to do the same, give the same information again and again. So that's just a part of my DNA. I want people to learn. I want to, and part of it acknowledges the psychology around money and how you feel. And because nothing is getting through until that happens. So that's a very early chapter. And then I go through some of the nuances, having credentials and my CFP and going through that experience to build my own knowledge and fill some gaps. I'm able to really be clear and concise in explaining certain topics where if you follow this through, you can easily reach financial independence or at least get started on the path. We're going to be thrown roadblocks. There are going to be hurdles. There's stuff in the past that could be impacting us, but just starting to do a few things right with your finances. It's kind of, to me, it gets contagious, especially if you have that curiosity. And I really encourage people to go digging around the things that you're most interested in. And then you can bring it back to all the other fundamentals that you need to have. But the hardest part is just getting started. So,
For sure. I'm looking forward to that book. I'm going to kick it over here to Smiley here. Before I do, quick story. So I don't know if you can see this.
I see that $2 bill.
Yeah.
I love to see that.
So my dad growing up as a kid, my dad was thrifty as well. if I ever got the courage to ask him for money, he would give me a $2 bill and he would give me 2 bus tickets. The 2 bus tickets was for me to go find a job and come back. And the $2 bill was in case I got hungry to get something to eat. Of course, I never
Wow.
spent the $2 bills. I always kept them because
There
I'm
you
like, this is the
go.
coolest thing ever. Yeah.
Yes.
So your story resonates with me. So I'm glad you shared that. Yeah. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Everyone has a
Smiley.
great story. And
Yeah,
that's how I
right.
first
Everybody has a
learned.
story.
Yeah, that's how I first learned how to save. So when I was, collecting all those $2 bills, finally somewhere down the road, I said, you know what? That was the first time I learned how to save. So even when I thought I was completely in poverty, had no money, poor college kid, I was still saving those $2 bills. And it added up. Now it would have added up more if I would have had it, in a bank or invested or something.
Right.
But the lesson
Yeah.
still stuck with me, and I used it in other ways. Yeah.
That's right. Baby steps. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Definitely. Can you explain the picture behind you? Are those, is that a frame of $2 bills?
Yes,
or before
it
we move,
is.
it is?
That is one of my most proud. I have a CFP, my master's degree and all that, but this $2 bill uncut is my most prized possession.
I
So
love
I did
it.
I just
it
did a
is.
quick count. There's 32 of them there.
Yes.
Correct?
It's an uncut sheet of $2 bills because the $2 bills represent so much to me. So I ordered it directly from the Department of Treasury like years ago, and it came in this tube and everything, and it cost more than $32. I think it cost like $102 or something like that. So what a ripoff, right? But anyway.
Well, that's amazing. I've been staring at it during the entire podcast, so I was like, "That's cool." So awesome.
So if you go to the Department of Treasury, you can get one of those. Now, the issue has been, so I ordered a long time ago. I finally got it framed, and they're actually unique serial numbers in a series. And if I cut them, I could go spend them. Of course, I would never do that, but they are real $2 bills from the Department of Treasury.
Wow.
So I have a group that a lot of them are interested in money, of course, like me, and they're like, "Oh, I want a sheet of those," and I go, "Well, I have an alert set up an alert with the Department of Treasury." So one day they finally said, "Oh, these are available." So I send a note and I go, "Oh, they have these available now." And I think like 2 hours later, somebody goes, "Well, they're all gone." So I don't know. I guess they're scarce now or whatever, and it's very hard to get them. But I purchased it directly from the Department of Treasury, and it is one of the most prized possessions on my wall.
Wow. I love it. And before we go into the final four, but tell me this. You mentioned something, you talked about the one to many. Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you would like to share? Because we have people who listen to us in Bulgaria. We found out there were some people in Africa listening to us. So we're going worldwide. So from a one to many perspective, is there something you would like to say before we go into the final four?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that there's not just one way. And if you're listening to a smart person or individuals that's talking about a topic you're interested in, they don't have to look just like you, but take away whatever is most important to you and make it your own. There's not just one way. When I first started sort of down this FIRE path, the avatar for FIRE was young, white, male, high income, no kids. And that I was the complete opposite. And that could be very discouraging. If you're seeing all these faces and all these people doing this and they don't look like me and they're so far from my situation, take away whatever snippet you can get from these individuals. There's no need to go all in on one person or one individual's ideology, but you can take pieces from each of them and make it have it start making sense for you. I mean, it took me years to really put my picture together, but it wouldn't have been possible without all of these people. So with all the influencers, the credential professionals, all the people that know, that are experts in whatever area they're talking about, take away what's going to help you build your own picture of what you want, like your next step to look like.
Thank you with that. And I guess as we move into the final four, here's the first question. If you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, financially planners like JP Morgan or Rockefeller or Oprah or someone that's alive today, who would those four representatives be, alive or dead, the financial people you would just love to sit there and pick their brains and different things?
Okay, did you say four of them? Four. Okay. You mentioned one. So one would be Warren Buffett. I loved watching his documentary, Becoming Warren Buffett. So if you haven't watched that, that's pretty good. It's really more about Warren Buffett, the man, not necessarily Warren Buffett, the investor. It was an interesting look. So it would be him. Melody Hobson. I love her. She is, I believe, CEO, president of Ariel Investments. And she has an amazing story. She's passionate about financial literacy, just like I am. And it'd just be fascinating to jump into her world and pick her brain a little bit. Let's see who else. Who doesn't love Oprah Winfrey? You know, I'm a sucker for a great story, and I was just very fascinated with like her upbringing. And really, I like to see the transition from where you started to where you're at today. So I like to see that movement. Let's see who else. You know, probably Denzel Washington.
Of
So those,
course.
yeah, he's a completely different domain than I am, but I think that he has a lot of wisdom and the qualities that he have in perfecting his craft and the passion that he has and making an impact on his whole industry and his whole domain is inspiring. And so those would be the people, because I love to have a mix too.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice, probably something around. Well, see, that's a hard one. I was looking at the opposite end of that one, but probably a lot of the encouragement I got around swinging for the fences.
Mm,
Somebody's going to have to do this, so why can't it be you? I mean, I pass that on to other people too. And I just never thought, again, when I was growing up, I was taught to just get a good job with good benefits. And today I look at that as kind of a small thing. And now I just go for the gusto. I go for the big stuff. And if I don't make it, like, it's like, that's okay. Like, it's not going to ruin my life. But I didn't used to always think like that. So when someone was telling me, yeah, it's like, shoot for the stars, go for it big. And I think a lot of young people don't get that told to them. And so in all my financial literacy classes, even though they're about money, I always start with talking about what's your biggest dreams. And that's how I begin it. And then we work the finances around that to say, okay, how can we get to your dream? We all have big dreams. So I guess that would have been it.
I like
love it.
that. So here's one. It's a little personal. What is something that never fails to make you laugh? Just side bursting gut
Oh
laughing.
God, it never feels to make me laugh. Oh gosh. Um, that's a hard one. It makes me laugh all the time. Uh, probably babies. I just love to see little babies. It's like you got this
Yeah.
miracle coming into your life. I can't help but laugh and
Right.
smile. Just thinking about my own daughter. From the time she was so tiny, so many things she had never seen before. And then you realize, well, we've been on this earth for 30, 40, 50 years. And she's just seeing this, like, how beautiful. This is a miracle, and how
Yeah.
how funny and laughable it is to see that this person gets to take over the world now. And so
Yeah.
so yeah, babies always make me smile. They make me laugh. I like to try to make them laugh. So
Sure, sure. So, what's something you wish that you were better at?
ooh. um I've been thinking about this a little bit lately, especially with the book coming out. I don't think I'm the greatest marketer. So you know marketing, promoting, and things like that. I like to share I love to share education as far as finances, and I love to see other people win. But I think when it comes to myself, I don't do near the promoting and the marketing and the, look at me and, 8 posts a day on social media and, doing all this branding and stuff like that. I'm not that great at it. Now, there's a better way to do it than another, I'm sure. And that piece I'm just working on. I have some people that I've built pretty good relationships with, where I know they're good at that. And I probably just need to ask for a little bit of help and admit that I'm not so good at it.
Sure. Okay.
Well, Jackie,
Well,
I want to tell you, this has just been phenomenal. I'm just so humbled by your journey and your experiences and your wisdom. I'm excited to go get your book. I love that clever idea of writing letters to your daughter. It's just, and you said the word that you said was to memorialize the
Yeah.
content. That is such a clever way because that's legacy. That's for
Right.
your granddaughters, your great great
Right.
granddaughters, grandsons that you won't
Yeah.
even get to meet, but they can like, look what our great great grandma wrote. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today on this Saturday morning. We appreciate you.
Yeah, this was awesome, guys. I really appreciate it. And I guess just to take it just one step further about the book and memorializing it. So these days we've got a lot more technology. So
mhm.
you don't have to write a book, but somehow take the knowledge that you have and pass it on. Maybe it's a audio recording on your phone, maybe it's a YouTube, maybe it's a video, maybe it's something else, but do that. Like, that is a way to pass on this talk about generational wealth. That's what I consider generational wealth. So I would employ people to do that in the spirit of in a similar spirit of why I even wrote that book, Money Letters to My Daughter. But it was been amazing, you guys. Talking to you on a Saturday morning. I couldn't think of a better way to spend it. And this was a lot of fun. And I wish you guys so much success. I love what you're doing. So that's why I didn't just say yes. I said yes, when.
All right. I love it. Thanks again for being on the podcast, Jackie.
All right.